Welcome back to Fishing the 262. In today's episode, we are going to talk about living rubber. Tying jigs with living rubber is a little bit different animal than it is with tying silicone tabs, so I think it's important we talk about it. First and foremost, when you buy your living rubber, you're going to notice that it comes in rolls, so you're going to have to cut your strips. Not a big deal, it's just a little bit different process with the living rubber. I know guys that throw living rubber exclusively. I view living rubber personally. Living rubber is a more of a finesse-y type technique. I like it when the water is a little bit cooler maybe. I don't throw it a ton of the time, but I definitely keep some living rubber handy. So you can see here, this is going to be fine cut. They call this reptile rubber when you order this stuff. We're going to tie this pretty sparse. Like I said, I view living rubber as a more of a finesse technique than anything else. I have a buddy that swears by living rubber. I have buddies that use it never, and then there's a lot of guys like me that just use it situationally. But whatever the case may be for you, I think living rubber is worth having. So we're going to start out with a little base wrap. Once again, we've got Danville 210 denier flat wax thread. And when I tie my living rubber, I cut my lengths just about the same size as a tab of silicone, give or take. So you can kind of see there, they're generally speaking the same size. But one thing I like to do with my living rubber is I like to tear it into smaller strips because it becomes more manageable when we do it this way. I find living rubber more difficult to tie personally. I don't tie it a ton. It's the same process as silicone. It's just a little more finicky because if you don't cut it into these smaller strips, you end up with a lot of bulk in the middle, and I don't care for that. So we'll get that situated where we want it. This is just a green pumpkin, and also know that the colors of living rubber are not going to be as vibrant as they would be in a silicone. That's okay though too, because in some of the clear water situations that I fish, I think there's something to be said for the dull finish of the living rubber. That's just anecdotal though, you guys. Like I said, I don't have anything scientific to back that up. So we got our first little tabby tied in there. We're gonna go with number 2 here. And again, this is gonna be a pretty sparse jig because like I said, for me, living rubber is cool water, it's finessey, and I just don't use it a whole lot other than those situations. So we're going to get that tied in, cinch that down nice and tight. I'm trying to keep this collar relatively thin like I do on all my jigs, and I'm putting a pretty good amount of pressure on this 210, you guys. This stuff is pretty hardy, and you can wrench on it a little bit without really damaging it. Now, one thing I've got is a little gap there. I got a good overlap on that side, so I'm going to tie in one more little section here just so that I get a nice full coverage of my rubber here. And then we're going to add just a little bit of purple just to set off a little bit of color in this jig. Nothing too flashy here, you guys. These are really basic, really easy to make at the end of the day. It just requires a little bit of patience to make sure that you get a nice full tie. All right, a couple more wraps there. We're going to throw a few strands of purple in this guy just to give it a little extra pop. Small amounts of purple. Real skinny. I don't need a ton of color in this jig. The paint that I have on the jig head itself is ProTech Green Pumpkin. I call my Green Pumpkin custom. There's nothing really custom about it other than the fact I had about a half a can of regular Green Pumpkin and I had a half a can of flat Green Pumpkin. And I just got tired of them running a little low, so I combined them into one, shook it around, and I really like the color. I think it's just a classic Green Pumpkin, really. All right, we got a little purple up top. We're going to flip that over. And we're going to tie just a little more purple in there. Yeah, that's a little too thin, a little too sparse on that one. No exact science here. I don't even take the time to count out my strands on the living rubber, you guys. I just kind of wing it. Get it where I want it. Tie it off. No big deal. All right, we're going to give this a nice couple of tight wraps. Cinch this bad boy down. Got my collar a little thicker than I'd like it on this one, but it's still going to work and it's still going to fish. We just want to make sure we don't have any exposed rubber. And I'm struggling a little bit here, of course, because the camera's on, and that's how it goes when the camera's on. It never goes according to plan. All right, I think we're about there. Again, this is a little thicker than I'd like my collar to be. But again, we're still going to end up with a highly fishable jig here. Get my little piece of braid to finish this guy off. And again, you can see this is pretty much the same process that we used with the silicone. When we get to the very end here, it's going to be a little bit different when we trim our ends, because these are all connected together. They are not separated like they are on a silicone tab. So when we cut them, we're going to have to stretch them, and I'll show you that, and make sure that those strands actually separate. Get that out of there. I'm going to forego this on this jig just for the time's sake of the video, you guys. Let's get right into trimming these ends up. We're going to give this a good stretch. And I'm going to try to cut it slow. There's something oddly satisfying about cutting living rubber at the end of the day. And as you cut, you'll see each one of those strands pop free, hopefully. Give that a good stretch, cut them slow, and they will mostly break free. You may have to come back in here and sort out a few of these and split them and separate them, but just take your time the first time around and you'll save yourself a lot of work later. Again, we'll cut that nice and slow. Got a little extra time off of work here. I just had a bunch of dental work done. You'll notice I'm in the same outfit for about 3 straight videos. I took advantage of some of this downtime to get ahead on the content for you guys. Hopefully in the near future we'll be having a somewhat significant channel update here, but we'll see how that all works out. Got to get each and every one of these. Get some stragglers in here with the purple. And then we should have that smaller tab of the green pumpkin. Where is it? There it is, right there. That should be our last one, you guys. Pop that sucker out of the vise, give you guys a look at it. Try to clean that up a little bit. Make sure all of our strands are separated. We're going to actually give this just a little trim because I cut those tabs just a little too long. I'm going to cut a little material off of this one. All right, there you have it, you guys. The only thing left to do is throw our weed guard in there, and that jig is ready to fish. I will come back after the fact and put a little sealant on that thread just to give it a little added security, but you can see we have a fine cut, fairly finessey living rubber. If you ever have tested living rubber in a tank, it acts a little bit different. It doesn't quite have the flop, if you will, that a silicone does. This is just going to be a little more lively, so I think that's where it plays in the cool water personally, especially in the spring and the fall. You can just kind of let that jig breathe on the bottom, if you will. Test these in a fish tank if you guys get a chance and you tie some living rubber. You'll see how it behaves a little bit differently than silicone underwater, and I think it really shines in the cold water months. So I think you need a few of these in your box in the spring and the fall. I've heard the argument. I've got a buddy that swears by living rubber. He throws it almost year-round. His attitude on it is kind of that it doesn't impede the bite in the summer, and it helps the bite in the spring and in the fall and into the winter. So he just goes with living rubber year-round, and he's a really good jig fisherman. I can't argue with the results that he gets. For me, it's a little more niche, but I do think it definitely has a place in the tackle box. So hopefully this little video on living rubber helped you guys out. We'll catch you guys on the next video. Tight lines, everybody.